Hello and welcome to DM's Travel Book Club, a guide to the planes, where each episode we explore a different plane of existence as outlined in the Great Wheel cosmology in the role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Yay.
Hello, Fiona.
Hello,
You're Fiona.
Hamilton.
I'm Hamilton.
I know.
That's how we introduce people, right?
That's how we introduce each other, and it's been a little while since we've actually done this, so please forgive us. But
Yeah.
also, that was a great that you cracked that opening. So it only took you to the end of this series to get it right.
I tried. I tried.
Little
I've
things.
learned.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it has been, hasn't it? How weird, really.
Yeah.
Like, how long it has been since we've done one. It's probably been 2 months.
It's been 2 months for us in this time because yes, as you may tell if you're watching this, I have moved. I've changed places.
Looks like it's the same stuff, but slightly differently arranged.
Yeah, it's different ways. Rather than getting the full view of the bed and everything else, then you just get a little partial view because I've got basically.
Also, you're now a goblin, supposedly.
I'm a goblin. Yes, I'm wearing my adventure questing time T-shirt, which is a D&D London thing, which I've not been to in ages, but it's good fun. So I'm a goblin. So yeah, but how are you, Hamilton?
How am I? I'm very good. Yes. I've got like last time we talked, I was doing completely different things. So I find like what they're going to be like is Hamilton's talking about something, and then it's like you're going to say what I'm doing now, and it's completely different. So I'm fine. I'm good.
I'm doing good.
Now we can say, and now we can finally say, whilst doing this, that Planescape has been confirmed.
Yeah, you were going to say Spelljammer confirmed. We knew that, but yeah, but Planescape has been confirmed.
Planescape has been confirmed.
Yeah.
Coming out when this goes out, probably about a year later.
Yeah.
But you, if you're listening to this now, you're way ahead of the game. You already know all about your planes. We're nearly all the way through all of them. And
if you've been with us from the beginning, you already know that we were ahead of the game. But it's nice to be confirmed that we were ahead of the game.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least it wasn't. Wizards confirmed that they will never do Planescape ever. So if you've come to this though, once Planescape has come out, I hope you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
I hope it's great, and I
let
hope
us
this has
know.
been a helpful and useful tool for all of you. For your plane adventures.
Yeah,
but yeah, we had a UA, didn't we? Monsters of the Multiverse. No, not Monsters. Something of the multiverse, wasn't it? It was
Wonders of the Multiverse.
Wonders of the Multiverse. There are
Yes.
plane walkers in there, and there are. What's lovely that I really like from it is and our podcast of this actually came out today of recording. If you want to date this,
Yep.
You can go back on our sister show, original show, the DM's Book Club, which when we did about that UA, and it had. What I really liked is the feats that you can now get that relate to the planes.
Yep.
And they have not done a plane of conflict, interestingly.
We talked about that, yes. Yeah, they haven't.
They do have a neutral thing, but they talk about chaos and law much stronger. But I think what we've learned from doing this is actually the conflict planes are some of the funnest in their own way. I've been enjoying them.
Yeah.
And Gehenna, spoiling the intro,
What?
but it'll be up right there. So
Yeah.
that we're doing today is been one of my favorites for a long time. I've been very eager to get to this one.
That's very exciting. So yes, so far we have done Beastlands, we've done Cassari, we've done Vitopia, and now we've arrived at Gehenna. The well, it's quite fiery, this place. Would you say?
Yeah.
Like it's
I'd say this is the hell that people envision is
Yes.
more what Gehenna is. Like,
Agreed.
people think the 9 hells is going to be like hell, but actually that has one layer that is very hell fiery. But actually that is more how awful can a world be, like in different ways. From Stygia being like super cold ice place where everyone's got like, if they were mean to their friends, they were the people that lived there, wasn't that right?
Something like
people
that.
who like were like traitors and sort of like sold their friends out. But Gehenna is more pure in its evilness. It's not truly neutral. It's like neutral evil. It's neutral chaotic evil. It's not neutral. It's not pure evil like the Grey Waste are. And whilst Cassari is the neutral lawful evil, if you know what I mean. So there's a little bit more chaos here, but it is just mountains and fire. And I remember reading the little snippet in the 5th edition book, because I never transported myself there when I played Planescape when I was younger, and it didn't really come up in the Planescape game that I played, because that goes to Battle and Grey Waste, I think. I can't remember too long ago. So what I read in that little snippet was like everything is like at 45 degrees.
Yes.
There is not a flat plane in the whole layer, and I just think like that's cool. What a great idea. And like if you fall forever. Forever until you fall down, keep taking damage until you either die or something stops you, like physically stops you, like you've hit something very hard or a big animal, or you fly off into the infinite void.
Yes, absolutely.
Where no one has returned from, and which is kind of fun. I think I would love, like, if I was going to do this, and we'll get to mimicry, I think I've got a fun idea that if someone did fall off, that I would bring that into it, but we'll come to that later. There's a little spoiler.
A little spoiler coming up. So yes, so this idea.
What do you think of it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting one because I too I've only known it from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and yet I read the same thing, that everything's at least 45-degree angle, which is interesting because in the old 2E ones, it varied quite significantly from 5 degrees to 8 degrees, which again for me is like bonkers. This idea that there's just no flat thing at all, and even if you as a traveller there mined out like a small ledge for yourself to sleep on, eventually the plane, because it hates flat surfaces, would break it off and you would fall anyway. So I love that the plane is, all these planes are working against you to an extent, or in line with their natures and stuff. So I just thought that was a really cool thing. But yeah, this idea that these 4 furnaces, these 4 layers or volcanic places, but also with earthbergs that also produce
four
lava.
Mounts, isn't it? The 4 mounts, fiery slopes of Gehenna. Yeah.
And again, it was one of those to me. Again, we were saying quickly off podcast that, like, for me, I've been really struggling with the term layers, because I think before, because we were like, oh, you just see it, layers of a plane that feels like very much like a cake in some way. So instantly I'm like, oh yeah, so they're all horizontal. But it's not the case, and we know this is not the case. We had that previously with Carceria and stuff like that. So here you have 4 basically huge ass volcanoes, and also the fact that this plane itself, Gehenna, is possibly the smallest geographically, even though it is also infinite. And that to me is, I was trying to process that, and you actually sent me a really good image of the different volcanic places, and that just helped me so much, just to be able to play
the Lazaretti maps are literally just godsends, and I really would love to spend some time just talking to how he kind of visualized them, like to see his process, because it's something that you've literally picked up on as well. These are super esoteric, beyond Dali like ideas of art, and he's able to sort of take those and create these images. Is kind of incredible, and I think I'd love to know how he went about doing that. But that will hopefully show that image right now. It's just the map that comes with the book. So if you get the Planes of Conflict 2E set, you get these maps in there and stuff, so it's really gorgeous. But yeah, essentially this place is just a lot of lava, and it has some really great descriptions of it, of like a pulsing like wound. Essentially, that's how much lava there is, and the deep fissures bellow forth steam, perpetually releasing and ever building pressures within inside the mountains. That sort of this idea that there is constant motion here, and it's just awful. Yeah, it's constantly it says that the earth is, even when you're moving on the earth, it is always rumbling, and as if you can feel the sort of the motions of the actual whole plane wherever you are, apart from on one particular layer, which we'll get to. But it does change a bit, because there is a cold, dark layer, but everything is just evil at its core. And it's the point you made earlier about it being infinite, yet the smallest of the planes is so interesting. It is an interesting concept, but I see it more as like they are all infinite in the sense of it depends on how you traverse them, doesn't it? Really, whilst this really has like the smallest in terms of like areas that you would go to that are of. I feel like it's like dreams. All these planes, that it's the dreams feel like forever, but really there are just those moments in between the dream that are symbolic and are important. And so really a dream could feel like forever but really last a minute, but actually if there's more like big moments in a dream, it feels like a longer dream or something like that. I guess is kind of the point, is that sort of experience over actual physicality. I don't know, a better term for it, but yeah, so that's what's kind of fun about it. But even though it is small and it doesn't have as many things as maybe some other worlds.
Thank God.
Yeah. One, great. Two, nearly every time it does bring something to the table, it's very interesting.
Agreed. Even if you don't use it in its like a natural form, because I will say, as with all Planescape books, there is some dated language in it, there is some dated concepts in it, but certain bits of like places of note in the towns, I've gone, oh. It's basically a concept of like, what if this was a real thing, and how would people react to it? And I was like, that's such a cool, like instantly I'm like, that's an adventure hook that I could take somewhere else. So I think certainly for this one, there's like several little towns or several different realms within Gehenna where I'm like, whilst I don't appreciate the language, because obviously we've moved on since then, I was like, ooh, I love this concept here and there. So, but the other thing to note, and this is the big thing I think for people, like if you, again, getting into your lore a bit, this is technically, although again, the 5th edition changes it a little bit, one of the big places where Yugoloths are, which is a great big force in the Blood War. And I will admit, like, cause they feature a little bit in my current home game, but I didn't realize that there is a whole, almost like Modron's S type, like there's ranks and how to get promoted and stuff like that. I was not aware of that at all, and I will say it is grim reading.
This is horror stuff too. This is like body horror. These like Gehenna is worst of the worst, and actually surprisingly, Bator comes off better.
It feels like we should be watching Going to Bator instead of Gehenna.
No, seriously, and I think. Yeah, Yugoloths are a very interesting concept, and I think it's a very like to briefly talk. Well, maybe we should go into our processes, and then we'll come to them. We'll go
absolutely.
to our headlines, and we'll get to them. But there are some interesting ways, and I really like the sort of the different and more intelligent, like the sort of intelligence focus of growth of them, which is kind of interesting, and so we'll come to that. So we've sort of started talking about it, but we should talk about geography. That's what we normally start with, isn't it? Geography. So, as we said, main geographical condition, everything is on a slope. There are 4
everything's
huge,
on fire.
Huge volcanic structures. The 4 of them are then, so these are the 4 furnaces, as they're
the 4 layers. The
4-fold furnaces. The first layer is Kalas, the first mount, and as it said, it could be said to be one of the gentlest layers of Gehenna. Of course, this isn't saying much because the rest of the plane's already ready to destroy someone at a turn. However, and so it's like there's no greenery. It's very rugged mountains, savage beauty. It says like there are some rivers, but most rivers if they turn to a waterfall, they become steam before they hit the ground because it's so hot. There is no light from the sky. The sky is an infinite dark starless void. But apart from, there's a few creatures that do fly around in there, but the light of the plains all comes from the earths themselves, from the lava and the sort of magma that is burning hot. And the floor and the ground of itself not magnified is 2d6
burning. It's
1d2 points of damage just to exposed flesh, and then it's 66 if you get yourself in some lava. So even if you just take your shoes off for a little, my feet are resting, really, you put them on the floor, you burn yourself. So
but that thing about the light as well, I think that's such a cool thing to describe as a DM. This idea that the light is ever present, but it just changes, and it's sometimes very bright, sometimes very dark. It's just, what a cool image that there is just no real natural light source.
Feel like should be doing this the whole
with your
time,
phone underneath you. Exactly.
Because that's kind of like how it's meant to light you, is everything comes from below.
It talks about shadows being it talks about shadows jumping up rather than being on the plane itself, which is just like that's
how weird is that?
Really
it's
cool.
kind of, I love that. It's such a cool idea, this sort of glowing orb of light that you sort of walk on. And it does have the river Styx, as all the lower planes do, and it winds through. That's one of the ones that's unaffected by this this pooling of this sort of steam. It doesn't like get steamed up or anything like that. It just runs as it does. But it's a magical river.
But also with River Styx, it's at its most potent here. So we've talked about it before, that if you drink from it, if you fall into it, you will lose your memories, and there's a big save for it and all that sort of thing. So the fact that here, like there's a big section in later on in this particular chapter which talks about don't drink any water. It's very dangerous because you don't know where it's from, and it's tainted. And
most of it will be poisonous. Any water that's like, it's got sulfites and sulfurs in it from like all these and heavy metals from just the core of the earth. What so then that's the first mount, the lovely, cool, chilled out, burn
gentlest
yourself mountain,
yeah.
gentlest mount.
Yeah.
You then move down into the second mount. Now the way to get to the other layers is really easy. You have to just go inside one of the mountains, pop into a bubble of magma, and hope that in 1 in 6 chance it's not one that burns you alive, but sends you to the next layer. Or there are huge caverns that you can drop down into, and people, as it says in here, handily will leave you signs to tell you. However, some of those signs send you into the infinite abyss where you will fall forever. But the signs that are for the actual ones are there as well. So you can either take a leap of faith, or you can jump into a bubble of magma inside magma and hope that you reach the second layer.
Yeah.
So this second layer, once you've
made
taken
it.
that journey,
Good job.
you've made it. Oh, happy days.
Happy
You're
days.
in the most brutal and unforgiving layer, which is Chamada, the
Chamada.
second mount.
Chamada.
This is just pure magma. There is fiery ground causes 1d6 points of damage per round just to explode, so it's already hotter. There is literally thousands of miles wide flow of lava rivers. You basically every so often the ground will just erupt with lava. So it's just, unless you're like a djinn or a fire ganassi, you probably don't really want to be here. It's
described here as like brutal, unforgiving, the cruelest, and this idea of oozing magma like a wound dripping pustulence. And I was like, yes.
Yeah, and anything not treated to resist heat must save versus magical fire to keep from bursting into flame at any time. So not great.
And this idea of like this idea as well of like a stinking sulfuric and that smelling of burnt flesh, like almost like a permanent stinking cloud as well. So you've got war, but again, it's, for me, again, what a cool place to go visit. But again, having to think about like, okay, what adventure huts can I put here? Why would my players want to come here? You know what I mean?
Things that are here. So like places of note. So we didn't do places of note on the other one. I was gonna run back, but maybe
we can do that. No, it's fine.
Let's do that. But there are some places on this layer. I think one thing to say though, you might think, maybe I'll escape to the infinite void around here, because there looks like there's a nice moon in the sky. Why is there a moon in the sky, Fiona? This looks like it's nice and cool in this void. Relaxation. Everyone, this place looks fun. Mimicry.
Yeah.
Everything is one with itself, and everything else is individuality, is an illusion. Nothing else matters except the ravenous hunger of the crowds.
Yes, unfortunately.
Why are they hungry? Why are the crowds hungry?
Unfortunately, Hamilton, that is no moon. That is a massive mimic in the sky. Like, everything's a mimic.
That's no moon.
It's a massive mimic. It is, I think reading that particular chapter, because it leads you into it. It's very much subtle, like, it's a really beautiful place. But the secret is, it's just a massive mimic. And there's been talk in 5th edition about these mimic colonies and stuff like that. And obviously there's oblexes, which is like, I think, a one-up on the particular mimic here. This is the fact that this whole place is just hungry, and it draws people in. And I loved how it has a little thing where visitors come in and they'll befall some little accidents, a little bit of blood or something gets cut, and then another duplicate of them comes up, and then they, if they cause any trouble, the militia comes and corners them into a corner, and then the corner turns into teeth and eats them, and it's just like
yeah, exactly. You might just be
it.
standing, there's a picture in there, isn't there, of just someone like something's on my shoe, and then behind it's just this door turning into like
teeth.
With massive teeth about to eat it. And it reminds me very much of Aor in Critical Role Campaign 2 at the end. I don't know if you got to the end of Campaign 2.
Did,
and
yes.
The land that they go to, which is run by Molly's character, the Nonagon.
Yeah.
And they're all singularly connected, and it's this sort of memory of a city, and these people all are speaking as one. It just reminded me very much of that. But that's probably because Matt Mercer is a person with refined and good taste, that he would have read all the Planescape books.
Yeah,
clearly.
I think so. One thing to note, though, about mimicry before we move on, what I really loved about it is that there is a purpose to go there, even if you're like, this is an awful place. It does produce excellent goods, because when a mimic sort of takes a template of somebody to add to their collection of people, it retains memories of their former abilities. There's this idea that you can produce goods quite easily, and just that idea that, like, again, a story where you go, oh, we need to go find this person, and this person thinks they're real, but they're not. They're just part of the conglomerate of this mimicry. So but that's the thing.
It says at the end, isn't it? It hopes eventually to become part of a regular trading route, at which point it will have its pick of victims. That sort of thing. It's like, using capitalism to feed itself.
But how interesting this is just a sort of, again, for this particular chapter, it's sort of like hidden away almost, I feel like, because I was like, oh, it's drawn me in, and then I'm like, oh, it's a complete sham. It's a single living being. Like, and I was like, I didn't see that coming, and I love it when I get tricked like that.
It was really good. I really did enjoy it. I also liked it a little bit more because the chant is, someone saw a dragon here. I always like a dragon.
But now you're thinking of like a mimic dragon, which is going to be like one of those Resident Evil dogs, where it just splits down the middle and it's just teeth.
Oh my gosh! Oh, what if, like, isn't there a mimic that's a dragon's horde mimic?
I think yes.
There was one in the Fizzbands.
Yes.
That looks like a horde, like a dragon horde, but actually is a mimic. Yeah. No, that's
everything's
very cool.
a mimic. Yes, absolutely.
Everything is a mimic. We're mimics. This show is a mimic.
Let's mention the other place of note on that plane, though.
Let's do that.
The Tower of Arcanolofts, which I know we'll go into Yugalofts in a bit more detail anyway, but Arcanolofts are the most interesting, I find. So this essentially is like the largest gathering of them, and this idea that first of all, they've built this place, this tower. And something that I was like, oh, Hamilton, tick, was that it echoes evocative architectural styles from Sigil. So this idea that it looks like it's like it's maybe a bit of out of place in Gehenna, but actually, it is mimicking some things like that. It's a record vault for Yugalofts in general, so their history and whatnot. So if you go there, it's going to be very, very well protected, but also you can find out a lot about them. But here's the little thing. Again, it was sort of hidden away at the end. It's like, inside you have bodies of flayed petitioners dangling from chains. You're like, no, that doesn't sound good. But this idea that Yugalofts are so big on contracts, that is their main deal. They love making contracts. So the idea that you could have a contract inscribed on living skin of a petitioner in a cage, which again, maybe session 0 on this, but this idea that petitioner doesn't know anything else other than what's been written on them. They've lost their memories, stuff like that, so they only know what the contract contains.
Reminding people at home, this is an evil plane, and it's a terrible, and like it's a really fine line to be treading in this. So but the Arcanolofts, as you said, though, they go across. They reach out into the plains to find information and like store away secrets. They have the book of knowing, isn't it? The book of knowing that they have.
Because that's about their names, isn't it?
Yeah, so they know all the names. They write down the names of the Tanari, so the true names of like demons, so they can sort of, if they need to ever control them, they can use that. And so they're very like they're all very much about like understanding and knowledge based, and that leads into the sort of whole Yugoloth sort of structure as well. We should probably, maybe we should chime back then to the key places on the first layer. Then there is the abominations layer, which is a cool character, which is it's the abomination, which is also known as the blowfish. When they're like, the name might be a lot less fiercer than it actually is, which is that it looks like a charred person. So you might think your character. I just thought like, you see this person and I could imagine how I play them is they go, help, and like your characters all rush up to help them, and then when they get near, they erase ahead their whole body, zing, spikes come out, and they can draw blood and basically steal your life essence, because they are basically their blood runs in its blood runs the power of a crushed god of evil. And it absorbs the strength of other creatures. So I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting concept. This idea that it's like there's almost like horrible spindly flesh and stuff like that. I did think that line could have done some copy editing, because I had to be like, so wait, is it
has it taken the blood of a crushed god, or is it just
Yeah.
just a
No.
little? I know that's just the inner editor. And
No, I'm with you. I had to read it.
Yeah,
3
you had to read
times
it,
understand
exactly.
quite what was going on. But it used to be a part of a dead god of evil.
Yeah. But yeah, just this idea. Yeah, because it feels like, and again that name of abomination, which if you've watched She-Hulk recently, that's also one of the characters in there. Spoilers
is it?
slightly. Yeah, spoilers slightly. But yeah, I like the idea of it, and this idea that it has this lair and the, again, cloud kill spell from the water as well, which makes it stronger. I think there's a very cool level. I would make it so that if you fight this creature, it blows itself up like a blowfish to be like 3 or 4 times its size, just to really
That'd
screw
be cool.
people.
Yeah, I'm up for that. Yeah,
Whoa.
that's really good.
Whoa.
Yeah,
No,
but or
thanks.
does it like kind of like it's made up of lots of different bubbles, so it's sort of like bubbles and
Oh.
bits. It's like like this sort of thing. I started watching Demon Slayer recently, and there's some. Have you seen that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like that big hulking thing which talks with other people's hands like this. It's kind of weird. Anyway,
Anyway.
it's not good.
Anyway, horror, by the way.
Yeah.
Evil.
See our warning, content warning
Content
here.
warning here, yeah.
At the beginning, there will have to be some content warnings on
We'll
these shows.
do
I think.
them, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The Teardrop Palace then is the other place on this first layer, which it brings back into the Chinese pantheon that they had in the old Tui with Sun Chang, which is the god of
Chang.
thieves and trickery.
Yes. Yeah, 3-faced god with 8 arms, with a long reach, making sure that nothing is ever anything can be stolen and anyone can be a victim. Which I thought that was such a cool little catchphrase from that.
Yeah, there is a beautiful map which I sent to you as well, isn't there, of the Teardrop Palace, and it's a very cool. It's got all these like spiraling, and it's very Nautilus. It does even mention Nautiloids in the thing. So I don't know if there's a connection there. I couldn't find one. I did a bit of searching, but it has these sort of conch shell centers because it's all about the infinite with them, and the opposite of the infinite, and how they make their palace infinite by stealing land from gods.
And then when the
Yeah.
gods come, they imprison them because they're like,
them.
that's how you get your powers. I
it's
thought that was really cool.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of it's a lot of interesting sort of lore in that, and kind of like that has a judgment point which seems to be a consistent sort of thing. In Gehenna there's a sort of judging element to it, and so maybe there could be some sort of relationship to that, to an adventure, which could be kind of fun. Really.
Yeah. There's also like a throwaway line about like once you get to the Teardrop Palace, like 2 things. There's that like the size and reality around you warps slightly, so you are made to feel smaller, like perception changes because so that that you are small in this god's presence, but also it means you have to at first you talk and sort of bargain with or sort of appease an avatar of this god, which is a monstrous jellyfish. And I just thought like this idea of something hovering in the air, like I think we've talked about this with Spelljammer very recently. I think they've expanded from like sea creatures in space to insects and stuff, but there's just something monstrous about having a sea creature float in air when there's no water,
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like I went to the Natural History Museum recently, and we were looking at Dippy, which is the Diplodocus that's in, and you just look at it and you go, it's just the same as us. Like, this is billions of years old, but it's got hip bone connected to the knee bone, connected to the, it's got rib cage, it's got a neck, has a gullet, like millions of years, and that's pretty much the same as us. And then you go see a squid and you're like, whoa, this is cool. This is different. This is the shit. Like, actually, dinosaurs, that's just a big cow. Like they say in Jurassic Park. But, like, the giant squid, fuck, that's huge. And what is going on there? There's no skeleton. It's different. It's completely different. Like, I don't know. It's just kind of crazy.
Whenever you see like an octopus going through a very small hole, like on a ship, that's when I go, ooh, I don't know. That doesn't look natural. Which it's not. No. It is natural, but it feels like, oh, nope.
Well, it's just that is the very much like moose and like crabs as well are so cool. Have you seen that? Have you seen Love, Death and Robots?
I have seen. Oh yeah, the crab on the ship.
Yeah.
That. Oh,
yeah.
Go watch that. Like, we don't have time. We don't have time to review that show,
Watch
but it's such a great show anyway. But yeah, I think that's, again, I feel like some of the language around the Teardrop Palace is a little bit dated and stuff.
Definitely.
But I love this idea of thievery, and that stealing realms from other people, and like this idea that you, again, it can make sense that you go on a mission for Sun Chang, or like you have to steal something from this, like a big heist, and you got to get around all these sort of magical conditions, or because they will know, you know, if you appear in their realm, they'll know, so that you'll be shrunken small, so maybe you need to bring extra stuff. So I think you can have a lot of fun with that. So.
Exactly. No, I think all of every single place now, as I said, has got something really interesting about it. And I think even if you wanted to remove the sort of like the sort of relationships it has, you could still just have a god of evil, trickery and thievery, and just leave it at that, because there is the issue of Oriental exoticism that has happened in D&D in the past. And so if you wanted to work that in, I still think the sort of ideas behind the palace, like the way that it functions, could be worked in.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
The third then, so then once you've gone through the second, you thought, okay, now I'm going to try another bubble of magma.
We need to go somewhere colder.
Yeah, this looks cooler. Well, the fires have nearly died out in Mungoth, the third Goth.
What a great...
And the illumination is barely there. It's barely any light. It's just ash and snow, hardened to that sort of like, you know, just imagining this sort of black basalt. Basalt? Yeah.
Yes.
It's a B.
Yes.
I think, yeah. Rock. It still has this sort of reddish glow. Isn't the lava isn't the problem. It's a burning rock mixed with the snow can just falls from the sky, or the ash that could... And the snow burns, like it's like, because it's like acidic, I imagine, because it's like
it's all mixed up together. Yeah, it sounds. You know what? It sounds dreadful. I'm good, thank you.
Mudslides as well, so you might have a mudslide that comes down.
Cave-ins it talks about as well. And you're like, oh my god.
Oh yeah, the cave-ins as well. Yeah, the cave-ins are quite common. So it's, I just imagine it like the sort of dormant space, and then it's like, oh, but all the other crap that goes with volcanoes, so the ash that burns your skin and you can't breathe in, it's the mudslides and the rain and the sort of like horror of that, and then acidic snow. Like what? It's not great fun. And then cave-ins, but people don't then, a lot of it says in a lot of these as well, people do live in, sometimes try and live inside these buildings. So like in the first layer, there are few denizens that still reside underneath the earth, because it's still doable, even though there are chances you'll hit some lava. Second layer, not possible at all unless you can live in lava, because it's pretty much all lava underground. The third layer, however, there are places that are underneath the earth and that you could try and traverse, but they might cave in on you at any time. So you've got to be aware of that. And then the fourth layer, there's pretty much everyone lives underground, so it's the only place to live. But because of that, it's not fun, because everyone's there.
Everyone's there,
But the places of note on Mungoth are Ontland. Now,
that's it, Ontland.
Leviatha is an interesting character of evil.
She's I believe a female presenting goddess. So, interesting enough, again, little side tangent, she's featured in the Uncaged Goddesses one-shot book.
Right.
So as basically that particular one-shot, just for context for this podcast, it takes level tier 4 characters, and they're pitted against, or they do a one-shot based around a goddess of neutral or evil origin, including this one, and that is you have to have a session 0 about that particular goddess, because it's very much
it's the goddess
about
of pain.
And
it's a lot about the endurance of pain. There's very much relations to sort of self-pain sort of creation as well, so you've got to really, but it's an interesting character. I looked into them a bit for a relational thing that I was doing for Shattered Realm, because I was trying to find really cool evil artifacts to find in the Abyss, as well as like other places, and so like I was looking for evil artifacts, and they came up as one of the users of there's the Book of Vile Deeds or whatever it is, and there's the Book of Exalted Deeds or whatever, and there's also like 3 magical artifacts of like ultimate good and ultimate evil, and one of them is related to the sort of whip, this like 9-headed whip of Leviatha, which is one of those sort of like makes up a whole armory of like ultimate evil, I think, from the old books. That's all I just remembered finding. So that's why I came across them. But yeah, not a fun place to be.
I think, but the little description though of Ontland, where it says pain is everything, sharpens the sense, and prepares one for the worst the world has to offer. So it's not necessarily about getting pleasure out of it, which is what I assumed straight away, because I just have that relationship with pain in that sort of sense. But I was like, oh, this idea that you're putting yourself through pain because that's the way to prepare yourself, and then as a result you have like this whole sort of ritual in this particular town about like moving people through it, and making them like, again, a horrible ritual, which again session 0 is definitely needed, but this idea that you get prepared for, and you've got flayed skin because of the snow, and I just it was so different.
Snow, and you go and stand in the wind sweeping acidic snow. It's like it feels like something that out of Fargo, I feel, in a weird way. Like it would just, people just go out and like, what are they doing? He's like, oh, don't interrupt, don't interfere, that sort of really cool. It's a very, and that wind picks up whenever you're there at random times, so that's like something that you can put upon your players if you so wish to have a special condition for them to deal with. It's a very interesting plane. The next one is Portent on this level. Deception, betrayal come easily to everyone here. Anyone who doesn't play the game becomes a part of it. There's a price to having a spirit, and it usually comes in the form of a cage, which is quite scary.
Very scary.
And not good. Again, it's like it's no one openly rules the stone. All manner of cutters want it, but none of them can get enough control of the city to declare themselves the true ruler. So it's like and the picture of the wizened old woman who lives there, and it's very interesting because divination it works on this plane, but works with dire consequences. You have to, like, in order for divination to work, you have to use like the body or the sort of see it in the guts of an animal or something like that. It's all very dark, and so the fact that then this place named Portent, a very famous divination sort of spell ability, and
that NPC you just mentioned there is called Laughing Jane, which I instantly am like, nope, stop this, run away, because this person has like,
she has 3 mouths on her head.
3 mouths on her head, snakes coming out of the eye socket, which feels very Morkborg in the way. This idea that one snake says one thing, one snake says the other thing, and you're like, oh no, don't do it. But there's a great description of like the maze of streets it has, like a tracery of veins, which I think we've had before in one of the previous planes, like this idea that the streets are like almost like vein-like going up. So I can't remember which plane it was, unfortunately, but there's some really good little descriptions of stuff in this. I've said this before, that some of the reading in these particular ones, the planes of conflict, have been much better for me, much easier, much more engaging than previous ones. And I don't know whether that's just me getting into the Planescape now, or if it's just a different writer or a different style because of the nature of the planes. Just something really interesting about it. The one thing I did want to mention, sorry, about Portent, again, it's interesting because they were like, militia? No militia here, but fights are almost the verbal kind, because it has this idea of like, if you're angry and you're about to fight, it makes the body, this whole place makes the body think the conflict like out in your head. You have a minute to do so, and then if you don't, if you're still angry at the end, you start to do damage to yourself. Ooh, that is like proper control. That's proper manipulation. It's the idea that you have to think and reason it out, and like, I can imagine that fight starting, and then you're just there going, we need to come to a compromise or something, because I'm going to start punching myself in the face. And it's, I just thought that was, again, what a cool little tidbit that you could put that into any village. Like, it feels very much like the Prisoner-esque type of way. Like, people are very lovely and stuff like that, but then if you have an argument, it's just like nothing happening, and then you're just punching yourself in the,
It's about rationalizing conflict. It's really interesting sort of thing. And like, Buddhist thought on how anger is the sort of root of all, like, is the first like sense that you've got to destroy. You've got to like overcome, because anger is just like the worst of the worst and stuff. It's kind of interesting as it comes across here, but then it relates a little bit more to the sort of the ideologies of the Yugoloth in this sense of like, actually it's about, they have this sort of going under, going over sort of thing. That sort of like, you've got to see beyond the obvious and the sort of like strength-based attack. And it's not, this place is weirdly not about that. It's much more trying to be much more intelligent than the sort of like dumb anger of the abyss, where everything is just very much just like chaotic evil, and the overly like complicated and obvious thought of maybe battle, which is like very much like contractual and it's organized and ordered. This is very much like, how can you be so manipulative and work the situation to your advantage, irrespective of any contract? Because a contract with a Yugoloth actually, as much as anything, is not as binding as it is with a devil. And it's really about how you can work anything to your advantage. And so this sort of, it's kind of interesting. I don't know, it's just it's a very like when we talked about, when they were saying introducing Planescape is coming back, and I was reading something about someone saying, will this bring, I think it might have been Dicebreaker, I think, said, will this bring philosophy back to D&D? And it's just, I think it's just very, it's a really good point on like what the planes do and Sigil does with the factions, as we talked about. It just brings these very, very thought-provoking philosophies and ideologies, which are good and bad, that are interesting to sort of
I remember that article now. Yeah, I remember that article about the sort of moral alignments and stuff, and like whether that's going to be a motivation stuff. Yeah, I think that is.
Yeah, will it give? Oh yeah, was it? Will it give alignment a like actual reason?
And
now. Like, and in Planescape there was a thing that you could use, which was called, it wasn't called blessing, it was called belief. And you could use as an optional rule, which is your character you would try and state as your character a belief they have based on some of the philosophies that you see in the factions, or so their belief on that, and then as they go through the game, like define beliefs that they make and that they state, and then you can gain points to your character the more that they stick to this belief. Or if you change your belief, then you can gain different points and then stuff like that. But it was really interesting, like that was at the heart of your character creation as a thing that you could use as an optional rule about beliefs in like, not belief like as in a religious belief, but as in like philosophical beliefs. And like is like we tried using it a bit in our one, where it was like for example Chloe's character, knowledge over anything, like if there is knowledge to be gained, that is important more than anything. And so the point would be that if they found themselves in a situation they chose knowledge, and it's not a great thought, because if they chose knowledge over their friends, they are still going with their belief. But it might be, so it kind of puts it in the forefront of your character's minds, this sort of idea of like what you hold true to yourself, good or bad, and if you stick to it or not, and how that kind of affects your player. And it's kind of interesting. It's really interesting system.
I think, you know what, well, again, because we spoke about it before in other episodes on our sibling podcast, this idea of like optional rules. So like, for example, in Theros, Mystic Odysseys of Theros, you have piety. In Strixhaven, you obviously have the report card. In Ravnica, Guilds of Ravnica, you have the renown. So maybe they'll have something similar for Planescape, whether it's like an optional, like, you can gain, I presume, like, again, like factions, it'll be like...
factions have you have renown in factions in the original one, but maybe they do bring this, look at this like belief thing again. Because cool. I think it would be, they really, as I said, get into this is all about alignment. It's like, this is the definition of what alignment is. And so that's why I think Planescape has to become this very much about, what are your philosophies? What are your characters' beliefs in reality? Do they believe that law is more important than chaos? Like, let's really delve into what those, because those, are you neutral evil and all that stuff is not necessarily as important as do you believe this over this, or do you take that thought than that? Because believing in knowledge over everything can be altruistic and good,
but also
it also can be evil and demonic. And so it's that's what's more interesting.
I think it'll be interesting, again, because obviously we need to break away from it, and this is definitely an episode for another time. This obviously, and we spoke about it, this evil or alignments being tied to lineage and race. If it's tied to planes, which then impacts, so that your environment impacts on you, that's less problematic. And that's
I even just think I've always seen alignment. I just don't think any race should have an alignment to it. I think it should just be, the alignment should just come purely from this thing, which is like, how do you see your character and how do they interact with the world, and making it more esoteric and more nuanced through Planescape, which I think they could do.
I think they could do
Could
that.
be really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Agreed.
Oh, okay. So we'll get to the fourth mountain.
Let's get to Craggath, right? Craggath.
Yeah, Crangath. Got an N in
Crangath.
there.
Apologies.
Got an
Yes,
N in there.
I know. I jumped ahead. So it's like Crangath, the dead furnace.
Yes,
Oh.
it is. It is. It's a black stone attests to its all-pervasive influence. It's dead and has been dead for a long time. The entire layer swims in a void of oblivious silence.
Oh,
The only noise is the
Worst
sound of feet scrabbling over the darkened, icy stone, and the only smell native to the layer is the faint reek of brimstone in the ice. It's cold and causes 1d6 points of damage per round. The wind barely blows. It
only blows when a
stale.
portal opens into it.
Yeah.
So that idea again of it,
Yeah.
silence compared to all the noise and all the light and
Yeah.
stuff before, which is dangerous, and now
Yeah.
nothing.
You just hear this. You're just in nothing, and then you just hear.
Scrabble, 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 scrabble. Whoa. It's like two ends. Oh. But yes, but then
There's some Foley.
there's some Foley. Then we'll put that in.
Free Foley.
I'll get out the coconut. Get the coconut shells out.
That's a good one. That is a good one.
But there's
For
a place.
the horses, it's great.
There's a
Night-
place, the night below, this realm, this idea of like, again, the little bio says cold, scheming, and hatred of life form two basic precepts of existence. And a god here, the orcish god of stealth, Sharizis? Is that Sharazis? Again,
Shargas.
there you go. I knew I said it wrong. I think I'm actually got it typoed wrong on my notes, but yes. This idea of a series of caverns extending off into infinity. And the only light that illuminates 5 foot. It doesn't go beyond that. So it feels very much like if you played games like Amnesia, The Dark Descent, all that sort of thing. It's just, oh.
Yeah, and it says earlier in the book about the minute this is the sort of place where where light is and dares to be turned off. It's even worse than Pandemonium, where light is very much will attract things you don't want to attract. This is just like light just will breathe a life that you don't want to breathe into the world. It's kind of like it's not fun. It just sounds like awful. I don't know. I don't like it.
But 4 very different layers, 4 different environments,
100%,
but all
yeah.
connected in some way. And I felt like, again, I know it's been a little while since you and I have read and done this particular podcast. I know obviously we're doing it as it comes out. It looks seamless, I know. But I was like, ooh, this is really interesting. And like I said before, it is the smallest in quotation marks planes, even though each one of these mountains, these volcanoes are thousands of miles wide and stuff, and you can have stuff on the top and the bottom of each one. So it's like that sort of kind of like almost reverse gravity as well. Just like there's so much here for what we would assume as like the fiery one, but you can play with it. There's so many different assets and aspects of it that I instantly was like, this interests me quite a bit. Maybe compared to other planes, which feels like maybe one note in a way. But,
I agree. Because we've talked about it, and there's so many different like parts to it that all have a different sort of structure. Like the last one, a lot of it is all cavernous, and so it has It has 4 very distinct. I mean, 1 and 2 are similar, but 2, I think 1 is like the first planing just gives you a hint of everything.
Yeah.
And then the next 3 planes really have a distinct character.
Yeah, it goes off into different directions.
Extremes of each version. And yeah, that sort of idea of that, because the Pandemonium caverns are very much like loud and always loud and nothing is silent, but this silent darkness is just horror, right?
Yeah.
It's like
it's
that
proper
is the
space alien
haunted
time.
house. Alien planet. 100%
Scary.
So that's the geography of the place.
Can I just mention another place of note,
yeah.
which I believe is in the first layer, but I'm not so sure. I want to talk about Fo Ling Po. The city of ghosts, essentially, surrounded by hot mist cast up by one of the attributes of the Styx. So I do think it is on the first thing. The reason I want to mention it, again, it feels like a bit like a ghost town, and again, definitely some dated language about it. But it has this idea that the natives who live there, they don't really speak, they don't say anything to anyone, but their tattoos on their body sort of speak their actions, their words, their livelihoods, essentially. Life story tattooed on their bodies, and they grow and change with each passing day, reflecting the deeds and thoughts of the soul wearing them. and this idea that they're outwardly passionless, almost like dead, walking about, but then they have a whole story put on their bodies. And I know this must be taken from some sort of maybe Maui or some sort of culture which does that sort of thing. So I appreciate there must be some cultural appropriation there. But I guess for me there's this idea that you can use your tattoos in a fight. So when you rise up against, the town will rise up almost like without a word against the threat, and then if needed they can they're again martial artists, again taking from that the Chinese sort of history there, so maybe again a bit problematic, but it talks about they can animate their tattoos and send these images forth to do the fighting for them. But if the tattoo dies, so does the memories associated with that image. So you could lose everything about yourself, similar to that stick stuff as well. Just bit by bit you lose that little bit of memory until you become a less person. And I just thought, for me, again, just taking it out of that maybe cultural stuff, and again maybe I would need to do a lot more research on that, but I just thought what an interesting idea that you have. There's that to take it into a different context, there's this TikTok going around just now, which I appreciate takes a minute, where it's like, oh, the your tattoo on your arm is your weapon in battle, and they show it as like flowers or a heart or something like that, and I'm just like, yeah, like, could you imagine like anything that your body was covered in, it becomes a weapon of some sort, and so you could have anything you want, but you maybe don't tell your players that, because this is the other thing, is that if your players go there and stay there for a long time, they start to get images on their bodies. I don't know. I feel like it's a really good idea, but again maybe needs to be a bit more read into it for myself as well, but also just to make it sure that it's culturally sensitive perhaps. But I just thought it was an interesting idea.
No, it is. And actually that reminds me, there was one of the places I want to talk about which isn't in the book, but is in another book, in a later book, and it appears in Manual of the Plains from 2001.
Perfect, well, go for it.
Yes, which is the Crawling City. The place that I really want to take my players to. I think it is a massive citadel. There's a picture of it, which hopefully we can get up now, which is a huge, towering sort of like mountain town of sort of Byzantine sort of architecture on hundreds of massive legs that crawls up all the layers. They are immune to snow and fire equally, and they crawl over all the layers. And this city is the home to the general of Gehenna, the mightiest Yugoloth and the leader of the Yugoloth race. And it is a city of like deception and manipulation and just like the sort of like everyone is out against everyone else for battling for sort of like power and supremacy, but not with might, with just machinations. And it's just Machiavellian to the point of, that's what I see it as, like the Borgias. It's like it's that turned up to a billion. And so I kind of think that's a very interesting place. As I said, it's not in this book, but it is in a later one. But it is a very cool.
When you sent me the image, it feels very much like a mixture. If anyone's read Mortal Engines, but also Terry Pratchett, the chest with the legs as well.
Oh yeah.
Less funny, more scary.
Yes.
But yeah, just definitely. I can imagine it just going at such a speed. Because if you've seen the Mortal Engines trailer. Where it just goes and goes and goes and eats smaller cities and stuff, and I just imagine your party trying to run away from this horrible thing just coming.
I did start watching that movie. I must admit, I got to the point where London turned up, and I was like,
that's it. Yeah, I think the books are better.
Are they?
Yeah.
Who were they written by?
Oh no, I have no idea.
No.
Some person, some British author.
A British person, was it?
I've made a big assumption now. But I think that again, just see the trailer because it looks cool from the trailer, and then then it sort of descends into a little bit of silliness. So
yeah, it did a little bit, but I'm sure it's great. I'm sure people love it. Fantastic. So then the people, population. So the population of we mentioned them a few times, the Yugoloths. Now the Yugoloths are the main. There's obviously, we've talked about some powers. We've mentioned them. There are some proxies of said powers. So Leviathan was one of the powers we mentioned, as well as a dire Lich Lord. It's all the great people.
I'm gonna get this name wrong because they were in Carceria as well. Is it the Gethalets? The
Yes.
So there's a pair of proxies for Sung Chang, rock and small, which
Yeah.
I just in my head it's like pain and panic.
Yeah.
That's this because they're basically these creatures that live at the Teardrop Palace that you could interact with as proxies for Sung Chang, and I was just like, ooh, really. I thought those were quite an interesting one.
No, that's true. Yeah, there are some. Yeah, exactly. And some of them. It made an interesting note here, which is that because obviously the petitioners, the people that come to these places, the planes, are it's after they're dead. This is where they end up, right? And you go there. Carceri people are put there because they've been bad and they've been banished there. Sort of thing.
It's a punishment.
Whilst people come to this plane because they want to end up here. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is where they have hope to come out. So that's kind of trying to tell you something about the evil of them. And I think that's kind of interesting. Of like these people are they are. It says the petitioner Gehenna are the refuse of the plains, or so it said. They're greedy and grasping, caring only for themselves. They perform no services or favors without some sort of immediate recompense. Immediate is the important part there. It's not like devils who will wait. They will make a deal with you and they will wait and then strike at the time is right. They just want something now. And because precious little in the way of values exists on Gehenna, at least not the petitioners, they're also mighty suspicious, and they won't render any help without demonstration of a body's ability to pay. So but they are willful, and it's just, I think it's kind of interesting. They will go through this, living here as an exercise in will, as it says.
Will.
So and that's kind of the point. But I think it's an interest. It kind of really puts the plane in it on a plate there, really.
I think it'd be cool to have, if you were doing like a one shot or an adventure, to compare Carceri and Gehenna one after another and see what else you can get out there, because I think that's the thing for me, is just like, oh, because there's such a small difference, that idea of motivation and stuff, and it's very, I think for me,
well,
very
because in
obvious.
Carceri they're resigned to it, and it's a resignation of being in this place. Well, this is like,
I chose to be here.
I chose to be here, and I want to prove why I'm here, and I'm going to prove through. But I want everything, and I want to gain everything, and that sort of greed is what like emanates as well in that crawling city. So, so then the Eugalos, now the masters of the bluff, and again, it's just the deception is just the key to it, because it's they have a structure, as you mentioned. They're born of the grey waste, which is the ultimate evil, like neutral evil center of that axis, but they left there because that's the sort of blood war's central point, so they came here to sort of set up camp, and they hide. And there's an interesting thing it says here, which is that Eugalos thought to be the most evil creatures that exist, having been spawned there, but it seemed, but then might not this evil hide something noble and grand? It has been noticed by some of the greatest philosophers that the greater a being's sagacity, the greater the mask it must project to conceal it. And so, if the Eugalos project a mask of utter evil, project what profound depths must they hide? And I think the Arcanolos provide that, because they have this tower of knowledge, and so is this, I think that just is like a morsel for DMs, for like, they may be ultimately evil, but what is behind that? Because why are they so evil, and what are they looking for, and what have they accumulated with all that greed that they've, so like, what is the, and they sort of hold sway over the blood war and the sort of,
because it's compared to, say, chaotic evil, which does it for chaos sake, for stuff like that. Here they choose to do it because it's that neutral, the planes of conflict. So that you're not doing it because I just felt like it. It is like it's planned in some way. So that's chilling, absolutely chilling.
Yeah, and it's not like the devils, which are just looking for power. It's not about necessarily just power, because as we go through like, we run through this quickly, because I know this is becoming a long episode, because there's a lot to be said, and it shows how much we like it. But the Eugalos, basically, in simplest terms, there are lesser and higher, greater ones, and there are a lot of stages in between. But the first sort of stages are all about learning that actually the lower the Eugalos, the stronger and more powerful you technically are in terms of brute strength. But what you learn is that by giving up that brute strength, you gain intellect. And then once you gain intellect, it's like about, then you gain power through that. Like, you just start to gain power because you have control, and it's about telling them that you are stronger if you're higher up, and it's about manipulation. And then you start learning that having less power gains you more knowledge and gains you less strength, and then you have to finally get beyond the point of like, there's a point where you have a lot of power over loads of Yugoloths, and it says a lot of people don't get above this point because they've got so much power, and it's a great point to be at because you're not really like at risk because you've got a lot of control. But then it's saying the people, once they start to realize that the control isn't everything and having power over them people isn't everything, it's actually knowledge and accumulating knowledge of everyone else that is more powerful, and like understanding your enemy is more important. And that's when you rise up to the next level, and then it gets further and further, and it's all very much like thought-based. It's very interesting, really.
We've not had anything like that, because the only thing I've compared it to myself is obviously, as I said earlier, the Modrons, and how that is just forced upon them when one of the higher-ups dies, another one takes its place, and it goes through that horrific transformation. Here it feels very much like a job interview, which you could die from, and then when you get it, there's a whole ritual, which I won't go into too much detail here, like you said, but it was gruesome to read. And again, it's that sort of thing going, as a DM, do I need to know this? But because I would love to be like, you I don't know, you accidentally come here, you help one of the lower Yugoloths, and they get higher and they change, and so I think there's something really interesting about it. And I will say for this, it was very short, their descriptions of each rank, as it were, which I was very grateful of.
I really recommend people to find that and just read it, because it is such an interesting way of running it. It's like looking at one here. So the least of the greater Yugoloths of the Nikoloths. So these observers, reporters and scouts on the fields of the blood will report to the Arcanoloths, who are above them, who record all these observations and plan the strategies of the Yugoloths for the next stage of the war. The Nikoloths hold fairly low status because they have yet to learn how to make this information work for them. When they begin to understand how to wield information and knowledge to their own ends, they are then ready to become Arcanoloths. So it's that they learn that there is a need to accumulate knowledge, but it's until they realise how that knowledge can work for them that they then get to ascend. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of, it's a really, again, I'm going on about it a lot, but it's a really interesting.
I think they make one of the most interesting villains or interesting play in your campaigns. And like I said, I've experienced one in my level 20 campaign, and it was such a brain sort of exploding moment when we realised all the things. And we only got a slither of it, and yes, this was very interesting for me. So,
and beyond that, there's not much else. There are no factions that exist here. It's not really a great place to be. And it says the sign of one are probably the only ones because of the will, but then is this the will they really want? They don't really like the evil. There are Bargests, are quite famous. Bargests, famously known, it comes up in the Drizzt novels. There's a Bargest in that, which is an evil creature, does a lot of really ruins. So when it's in Exile, I think it's the one where Drizzt finally emerges from the Underdark, and he starts to engage with people, and obviously people, in the book, people are feared of the sort of dark elves,
of Drow and the Underdark,
because of just like stories and stuff like that, and so he's trying to like interface with this farmer family, and then a Bargest comes along and basically just ruins it all for him, and everyone starts to blame, and then people there's a whole like, it's a really, but it's the Bargest, it's just this evil creature that's just being nasty and just saying all, being really annoying and screwing it all up for Drizzt. He's trying to be a nice person, try and do good for people, and it's like, so but it kind of explains that, and obviously mentions Gehenna in the book, so I remembered it from that. But that was my first encounter with it.
But then there's stuff like nightmares. So there's horrible horses with fangs going. There's stuff.
Cool horses, fire horses.
Fire horses. Your Rapidash turned up to goth.
Exactly.
You've got bone.
It's a goth unicorn.
It is a goth unicorn, absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got bone spheres. You've got hook spiders, which sounds scary. But then you had these things that you mentioned a little bit before. That I'm going to say this wrong. Is it the Slathras?
Slathras.
I can't. I know you said it too quick. But this idea of just flying worms in space. The idea you could be looking out into the void and suddenly you're like, oh, something seems to be hunting. Oh, it's too late. It's already got you. It's dead. Yeah. And you're just like, oh. That's me just going, ooh. evil. That's me all the time in this place. Just 'cause there's some horrible things. But yeah, so you've got a lot of nasty creatures around for random mechanics, including like the Tanari and the Batezur as well.
And there are Tanari and Batezur around here as well, because the war does fall on this plane as it does in any. And the Yugoloths as well. And that point was saying about managing the war. There's a general at the head of the Yugoloths, and they are basically they are in charge of who wins the war. They basically put their forces one side or the other, depending on how they want the war to work. So when they say, like, what are they hiding? Well, they are in control of the fundamental balance of evil in the whole of the multiverse. So they gotta know shit, because they obviously, I bet they know everything about all the Lords of Hell, and they probably know everything about all the Demon Lords. I mean, like, anything you want to, if you wanted a campaign hook, if there's a devil on the back of one of your characters, like, who do you go to ask for help? No other than the Yugoloths in your best bet, because you could either go to another devil, but you're only going to get yourself in more trouble. Demons are not going to be anyone you could be able to deal with, but you might just find the right person to help you if it can make it work for them. Do you know what I mean? If you can make it work for them, then it might work for you as well.
Definitely, I feel like Gehenna itself, maybe compared to maybe some of the other planes, is definitely more of a political intrigue one.
Yeah.
I think, and that's the key thing about it, to think about it in that sense, because you can just, there's so much more to it. Shall we finally then move on to magical conditions?
And then, magical conditions, and then there's not many, so it's quite easy.
It's very quick, and I think that's the key thing when we're getting into these ones. This is why I feel the politics of it, I don't know, there's something about the planes of conflict that are just, it feels more straightforward and stuff. But yes, the magical conditions, as usual, the divination and conjuration spells, summoning spells, go under a few changes as well. It can only draw creatures native to that plane, and of course they might not be very happy, and you'll have to do various saves to make sure you've got control of them. Enchantment and charming is a little strange. There's no, it says there's no charm to Gehenna, which makes me laugh. But it's just basically the idea that anything level 4 or above doesn't work, and then any spells like that will function one spell lower, so it's really hard to use. Fair enough. Invocation and evocation, they acted like one level higher, and then necromancy, spells of pain work much better, and then like, so damage is like a +1, whilst healing is a -1 on dice rolls. Classic.
Lower planes, eh?
And then elemental, the schools of fire and earth are more effective here, and on certain planes, and then other ones will be effective on other planes as well. So again, just cool bits of flavour perhaps, and so maybe something to keep in mind. Again, obviously, in your own games you can do whatever you want, but I just thought it'd be cool to, one thing we maybe discussed a little bit is that whether or not we would have optional rules or suggestions for this stuff coming in Planescape, because there wasn't so much in Spelljammer when we looked at it compared to old Spelljammer. I say old Spelljammer. Spelljammer's second edition.
I think new D&D, current D&D is very much rules lighter, and so I don't know if this will come into it. I think maybe there might be a simplified system. I think if there isn't, I think it would be. I think it might be like,
I just
generic evil planes, good planes, conflict planes have these conditions.
These conditions, I think that's because I just feel like
and then element B. They're like the other place says in battle. It says DMs figure out for yourself. You know what elements are going to work well where it's fire, and you know what ones are going to work bad when it's not fire.
I just for me, because I know it's been, there's a place we went to in our campaign where magic, it was something magic. Just if you rolled too high or too low, it would go off, and it would you would lose that spell slot, and you get damage to yourself, and we couldn't do ritual spells or whatever, and it completely changed how we operated, because we relied on spell casting quite a bit, and it was something like magic items, we didn't know how they work and all that sort of thing. So I was like, that changed so much, and for me as a player, I was like, oh, what can we do? And it didn't feel like a negative thing. It felt like we can play around with this, and so that's what I think. I want it to be something we can play around with, not as a you have to do this because it's playing, but just so that people aren't relying on like big builds and stuff, if they're relying all on spellcasting and suddenly spellcasting goes, well, they're going to have to maybe use other members of the party that aren't reliant on spellcasting in some different ways. And like, how do they figure out problems when they don't have access to their resources? So that's the only thing for me. I want to see more magical conditions, maybe said simplified in a way that we could maybe have a basic template for certain planes, perhaps, rather than going into maybe the nitty-gritty. But I just thought, what a cool concept. This idea that magical conditions on all the planes are affected in some way because of their alignment. I think I'm going to definitely keep that if it doesn't come up.
No, I think that's true, and I think I don't think we've recommended any more, can we? These books are really good for if you want to dive deep, and this is what I mentioned on our Spelljammer show, which is like, I was hoping which would come from them bringing out Spelljammer and Planescapers, that they would start bringing out content for those as part of their yearly schedules. Like, here is the Spelljammer adventure for this year or something like that, on top of the D&D general D&D ones. And so maybe they might do that, but then again, we have these books already and we have the community, and maybe we don't need to do that as they used to, because we have the internet now when they didn't then. But this is I think it's very I think they're fun. Yeah, but I think that is it, really, isn't it?
Well, one last thing. Also, I wanted to talk about the optional rule, that 5e.
Oh, of course, yes.
Of course, I know we always end on it, so it's fine. So their optional rule in the DM's guide is cruel hindrance. The plane's cruel nature makes it difficult for visitors to help one another. But that means whenever a visitor casts a spell with a beneficial effect, including a spell that restores hit points or removes a condition, they must make a DC 10 Charisma saving throw. On a failed save, that spell fails, the spell slot is expended, and the action is wasted. Now, obviously that's made for combat, but I like the idea that, again, that role play thing, that little bit of like a flaw comes in, perhaps after again, a DC 10 Charisma saving throw, that's quite low. But this idea that if you lose that, you become a little bit more bitter, that you want something, etc. And this idea that you, I don't know how often people use the help action, but you don't use it, and so that people can't get advantage.
I was going to say, you can't use the help action. Yeah. And like, you can't give advantage to someone on any saving throw, like, or maybe like guidance doesn't work. Yeah,
any bless, guidance, and even like healing word, all that sort of thing. I think so I feel obviously here it's like, with a beneficial effect. I just think anything like that, but maybe you could go into that whole like idea that damaging effects are higher, but they have to be, I don't know, selfish or something. I don't know, but I just thought interesting, and I thought cruel hindrance is such a great, like, I feel that really puts it as like Gehenna, cruel.
Yeah, that is it in a nutshell. But yeah. Well, then that is it. So, Fiona, you'll be taking us on a journey. Now we're gonna just leave these fiery plains behind us.
Too hot here, yeah.
And I think we're gonna go on a nice, relaxing holiday, aren't we?
Yes.
We're going somewhere really nice, aren't we?
Yes. So next time, folks, we are going to Elysium, the untarnished good, home to creatures of unfettered kindness and compassion, and a welcome refuge for planar travellers seeking a safe haven. So, after cruel hindrance and terribleness, we're going on a retreat, guys.
Yeah, literally going on. And then and so that's gonna, I like Elysium. There's some really nice, they've got some really great names. Thalasia, I love that. It's a place. So, Sea of Oceanus, we're gonna go bathe in the waters of Oceanus.
Yay. Oh well, I'll pack my swimming trunks, so that'll be nice.
I don't know if this is gonna be similar to when we went to Mount Celestial, and I was like, this is like R&R, and you're like, so bloody boring, and it's gonna be the same. I'll be like, I was loving Elysium. It was so nice and chilled, and
I'm just there with I'm just like, come on, we need to get back.
Quietitude. That sounds dull.
I'm like, come on, grey waste. Yes, but until next time, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and catch up on previous episodes and VODs of this and our sibling show, the DM's Book Club. Though I'm sure there will be links everywhere around us. And yes. And but stay safe. Maybe have some sun cream on for those burns. I don't know. I just not
exactly. Put some after sun on and get yourself ready for some nice some rest and relaxation next week.
Yeah, brilliant. Bring your sunglasses. I'll be.
See you on the flip side of the plains.
See you on the flip side of the plains. Bye.
Bye.